All right, we are officially starting. We are getting back into this thing. Whatever episode it's supposed to be. I don't think I'll clap today because it's a new beginning. Unless that helps.
We'll get you to clap later.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see. Oh man, it's been months. We've had months of chaos, though.
Yeah.
Both of our kitchens got redone. School and work, a lot of work, gigs. It became impossible to schedule something where we were actually both conscious to do this thing. And then
I'm awake. You know, I put Rose to sleep just a little bit of my 7-year-old, and I'm like, I'm gonna go do this podcast thing, and she's like, we were reading like a choose your own adventure book thing, you know?
Yeah.
And she's like, what would Daddy's power to choose be? Go do the podcast or go to sleep.
That's basically the thing that I was weighing as well. It's like, I don't know. Both my sons have been cranky this week, but it's probably because they've been just trying to push that bedtime because they're both out. I put one of them down and you've gone. The other one gone. I'm like, okay, yeah, you guys need to go to bed. Like, we're not blowing hot air here. We're like, you should be in bed by 9 when school starts. Yeah, they pushed it last night. Did I say pool? I don't know what I said.
I think it's Tool.
So we are back. We've had, outside of that wonderful stuff of reconstructing kitchens and so on, we actually had a gig together as a duo at the Porch Rock in Akron.
Akron, we played some Akron.
Yep, I think that went pretty well. Generally,
the same child she's like, I'm gonna record your whole show. Like, she was like, all video, and she recorded like 40 seconds or something. But what's sort of a bummer is I always record every show, even if it's on my phone or whatever. But she had my phone, so I didn't think of it. I'm like, oh, it's a bummer. There's like no audio or anything from it, so. Oh well,
there's audio. No, I mean 45 seconds, but there's something.
Yeah.
And I think for the most part, like I was.
Like it all went downhill. That was the first song, and just went.
Yeah, exactly. It started out strong and then end up crashing and burning. But for the most part, I think it went pretty well. I was surprised at the crowd. It's like one of those things where I looked up and I was like, "Whoa, we have people's attention." Okay, it's like, and they most of them stayed the entire time. Like, I didn't see a whole lot of new faces every time I looked up. So that was cool. I mean, at least we got that going for us. You know?
Gotta do some more.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was cool. I thought it was a nice little mix of we did some Bach and some Villa-Lobos, but also some jazz tunes and some gypsy jazz and some Indian
and we were
stuff.
Free with it too. You know what I mean? Like,
I think it was pretty cohesive ultimately. Yeah, we should expound on it more. It was fun. Yeah, I like playing acoustic. It's nice.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of stuck with the classical all the time, so I don't want to wreck my nails on something electric.
It's fun. I think I told you I was like so contemplating like putting something on these nails.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I'm not really tapping as much as I used to. I've mostly stopped doing it, so I'm like, I think I could put nails on 2 of these fingers. It'd be pretty useful.
Well, one of the things that I'm actually going for is to have the shortest nail possible and still get the tone that I like. Like, I'm trying to find that.
Yeah, I would like to find that too. Especially if it's just 2 nails.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like I've done a lot of point of contact, quote unquote, studying this summer. Just getting different nail angles. Like, I have my general tone nail shape set, but I'm trying to find how much I can get away from that and still sound good. And have a lot less, not necessarily click, but the shorter the nail, it's faster to play. Yeah. Like, there's a lot less stuff. And some of that's shape, some of that's length, and, approach angle, like a lot of point of contact, as I call it, studies. One of the guys that I ran into at a school I was subbing at over the summer, he was another classical guy, and he used the Kiss nails, that brand, and he's like, you got to get the square tip ones, which are only available on Amazon, and he swore by him. He had a great sound too, and I saw another guy do that at Oberlin like years ago, Lukash something, but monster player, and he just everything was Kiss nails. He and those just
I've never seen
over your regular
nails. Press on nails.
Yeah, pretty much. They come with a super glue or a glue nail glue, but that's mainly just like a watered down super glue, as he was saying. Yeah, and
So any non-classical guitar player, people with fingernail stuff, notice that that is not somewhat different than having, you know, your like 70 different types of picks close by or whatever.
Exactly. Yep.
Like, oh, I'm always changing and trying. By the way, I do these wagon picks. These are,
Yeah.
I don't know what material this is,
I have no idea.
but I really like the material. Random thought.
Oh, that's cool.
If anyone who wants to sponsor, but the problem with this is it's shaped for a right-hander, so it has these like bevels. So like depending on how I pick, and I'll switch pick. Like I'll pick like that, but then sometimes I switch to that kind of grip. And when I switch to that grip, it's more like a right hand, and so it's fine. But when I switch to the normal grip, which I do most of the time, it like hits the edge in a weird sort of way, so it's kind of a bummer.
That is.
And they don't really make the lefty ones, of course.
Like this. What do they call it? The guitar lift that I got.
Yeah.
This thing. It's right-handed, but I was like, wait a minute. If these just screw on and move, I can flip it, and that's what I did.
Yeah, and that thing is cool.
It should be this way, but I love this.
I know. It's kind of like I should get one of those. I wonder. I should have tried it when you were here with the electric to see if it would.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it should work because you can adjust these. So the body size. It's just a matter of making.
Well, yeah, I think even the way that the size was would probably work on the frameless guitar.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Like with that big of a back there, absolutely. I haven't tried it on any of my electrics yet, but I did do it on my steel string acoustic just to see.
Yeah, I'll have to get that link from you again.
Yep, it's just on Strings My Mail. Just get under guitar accessories. It's right there. I got the medium one. There's a larger one that gives you bigger range, which are bigger than me, so that might be more comfortable for you. But this is fine for me.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the guitar when I get the other guitar too. Yeah, I kind of like I hate putting my leg up, and I don't really like using a footstool that much. But I do like when the guitar is like, when it's angled a little bit, it is kind of easier for some things.
Absolutely.
Especially for stretching stuff, right? I'm like, oh, I could
I
stretch like a fifth.
I just like the thing I loved about a footstool is that it feels like I'm in complete control of the guitar. Like I'm really holding it, and it's part of it. But sciatica, back stuff, just after many, many years of playing, it just wears out. I don't know how like David Russell or even my old professors that still use footstools, I don't know how they still do it without tremendous amounts of pain. Because I tried switching back for like 2 weeks, it was great. And then I woke up one morning and it was like,
but you want to be David Russell, you have to just take the pain, my friend.
I get, maybe that's why. Maybe he's not really Scottish. He's just angry and in pain all the time.
Like, oh, this hurts.
God.
I better do it right because I don't want to do it again. Yeah.
But the what was it? This guy, the ergo play. This was my go-to, and I liked it.
Yeah.
But the guitar never felt totally secure with it. Like if I leaned too much, it would come out of the suction cup, and it wouldn't come off. But not having that security just kind of, it's a subtle psychological thing.
Yeah.
So I figured I'd try this other thing just for the heck of it, and if I didn't like it, I'd send it back. And
sure.
Day one, it was like, this is great, and I honestly think it might. Maybe it's the neck angle, maybe it's the angle of where I'm holding the guitar, but I feel like it allows it to play louder, like it sounds louder.
Yeah, I think maybe
on the guitar.
Yeah, we sound like a commercial today.
Yeah, hey, whatever. We do have.
Notice this Morgan amp that I have.
That is awesome.
That thing is great.
I will say, like coming over for rehearsals, it was like, ooh, amps.
Yeah,
things we don't have at home.
Oh yeah. Adam got the joy of playing the red plate and this new Morgan amp I got, and they're both magnificent. Really.
Yes. I think I liked the Morgan more. But that's probably because the speaker was right in front of me.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Like the red
plate, the nice thing with the head, you can try. I have like 4 different speaker cabinets you could try, and I actually have some speakers that I could swap out too, and you can hear all the. That's the nice thing about a head is you can try different stuff, and depending on what vibe you're going for, it can sound better one way or another. Blah blah blah.
It's like trying to test out different cuts of Wagyu. It's all going to be good.
Yeah.
It's not like the red plate was bad. It was fantastic, but maybe just because of that.
They're both they're wonderful and unforgiving in the best way. Like
Yeah.
you really, they do exactly what you say. If you don't get to flub around on them, really. I
Which
really
again,
appreciate it.
good.
It's what a different world, and it's back to that, like, wow, if I would have had that to start? It'd be a lot different. Like,
Let's try to avoid that particular rabbit hole because I think we've
Yeah.
beaten that one to death. But what was that list, the True Fire one, that'll help you get better on guitar?
oh
Is
yeah, so
we're in the top 25.
yeah, we just saw. It's funny. I was looking for something else, and I looked through our Wood Air Metal email, which you can email us at woodairmetal@gmail.com if you ever so choose. Yeah, and we made the True Fire. If you don't know TrueFire.com, they're probably the biggest like guitar teaching website out there. Probably, I don't think there's even a close second. But they're along the masterclass line of. There's all kinds of great masterclass
Yeah.
websites, but True Fire is probably the biggest one, and I would say the highest production one, except maybe that masterclass one that has like Herbie Hancock.
There's
And,
tone bass as well, but that's
Yeah.
strictly classical.
oh yeah, so yeah. Anyway, we made their top 25 guitar podcast of
If
the
you
year.
want to get better at guitar, is what the subheading was. So I
Oh.
don't know how big that group was. You know,
Oh,
you made
what was-
top 25 out of 26.
Hey, there was a lot of good ones on there. There were ones
Yeah,
I'd seen
no,
before, so I felt that was really nice. And I don't know how that happened exactly. I mean,
But it
we're
was fun
we're
to-
friends with a couple of the people that teach on there, so maybe that
Yeah.
helped. I don't know, but yeah. So that was cool. I thought, and that kind of came out of the blue, and you
Yep.
know,
It was motivating to get back on
we
this
didn't quite catch up to Guitar Wank, but we'll get there.
thing.
Bruce
Someday.
Foreman, Troy McGovern, and Scott Henderson, we're coming for you now. They're like,
You
we
got
don't
you.
care about you at all, but that's
Yeah.
all right.
Who are you? And I would care about this because. What? No.
It was just free publicity for Guitar Wank.
Yeah, there we go. So
Anyway, yeah, no, that was cool. I think that's
Yeah,
it's kind of nice to hear that some people are checking it out. And my favorite part of it though was, reflecting on the years of performing and and complaining was the last word.
That was awesome.
Which is
So
what we're gonna do
complaint
today.
tonight.
We're planning to complain. We're gonna complain a bunch.
We have a bitch fest for today.
Yeah.
A little bit.
We thought we'd come back with a
Doozy of a
controversial topic among peers of ours, probably. So,
Let's get everybody angry.
yeah, we'll just make people angry, and we'll go from there. But,
Okay, well, you spill it. You came up with it.
yeah, so
go.
I was just thinking the other day, I saw I don't remember where, I saw a post or something, and it was about a studio guitarist who had made a new record or whatever, and it just dinged in my ear or whatever, and I was just thinking, we blame the let's say pop music and whatever a lot on all kinds of things, right? The record labels and whatnot. But is there a fair amount of blame to go to studio musicians in LA and Nashville? And
Shots fired.
yeah, so ultimately the question is, did studio musicians ruin the music industry? That's really the ultimate question. And
Let's hear your take, and then I'll give mine. Let's do that because
Well-
we had to put the brakes on.
Oh,
in our
yeah,
text.
'cause it was so
like,
tempting.
Let's really
okay,
just save.
so
this
first off, there's just like an incredible musicians, and I'm just gonna pick on LA and Nashville because they're the hubs. But I guess New York used to be like that too, a lot more back in the day. You don't hear about it as much now, but they certainly have studios that people play in, and are hubs. So yeah, New York, LA, and Nashville are obvious hubs for studios, musicians, and like a lot of the people that we applaud, some of the great guitar players that you see, like I'm gonna try to stay out of saying names, I think. But maybe we'll get there. But that are on like hundreds of records. We all know those guitar players. Let's just stick with guitar. That they've played on hundreds and hundreds of records and whatever, and they've sort of defined a sound. And like you can tell who they are because they made a sound. And they kept getting hired to do that same sound over and over again. So the idea that I think it's too easy to pick on Nashville, so I think I'm gonna try to steer it towards L.A. And the reason I say it's too easy, I think we all know that like country music at this point, unfortunately, it's a very formulaic sort of thing, and people seem to really like it. So I think it's fine, whatever. And there's people that are doing well in the studio scene there, and they know it's like a known thing. Like it's not you're not supposed to be fresh and original and all these kind of things. You're not supposed to be whatever, but that there's a particular kind of sound you're going for. But let's pick more on the LA side of things, which is where most of the pop music is done. And I guess what I'm trying to lean into, and I feel like I'm not doing a very good job, but is instead, so you hire a band, you sign a band from Akron, Ohio, or some random place in Idaho because they show some promise. Or maybe you really like the lead singer or something, right? They get this kind of things or whatever, the look and then instead of letting that band develop and grow, you replace their parts with like a professional studio musician that fits some kind of sound that and it's kind of like, I feel like in a lot of ways it sort of destroyed bands for one. And I mean more like on the pop side of things, right? Okay. And it made it all sound the same, right? There's like a sameness to all of it. And so when people were complaining like, well, every song sounds the same now, and they've been saying that for the last 30 years or whatever, in these different pop music things or whatever, and I'll say pop rock, like popular rock.
Radio friendly.
There's this really like homogenous sort of sound thing that sort of happens, and it's not the musician's fault, but it's sort of the scene of it, right? That sort of, I know there should be professional musicians and there's a qualityness that you need to have, but it almost kills like the artistry in a sort of a weird way. We end up with a lot of things that sound the same instead of like a unique sounding band in some respect. And I wonder a bit if that's why, back in the day, you let Rush and then Rush was great musicians and they weren't going to need studio musicians. So this maybe not a fair comparison, but you let them to develop, and they let them change, and like one album doesn't sound like the next, but it's sort of a growth. And you let these sort of things happen, and they develop a sound over multiple records. But now it's kind of like, well, if you didn't get it right, we're just going to replace it with the studio tracks, and and it's like I don't know. It kind of dawned on me that maybe ultimately that scene is really not very good for the music in the end, because you end up with a lot of people that sound the same, I guess.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I totally disagree.
Great.
That's why I figured this would be a great topic to go into. And not like I'm trying to prove my aspect right, but like my take on it is like it's obviously a complicated issue, but with some of the things, just looking at it studio musician wise, I'll drop some names because I watched some videos of these guys and they're out there doing it. So, whatever. And I'm not bashing their playing in any way, shape, or form. They're phenomenal. And that's why I think I'm a little bit more on the side of I tend to disagree with that. Like, the Goo Goo Dolls. This one's a little bit closer to home, literally, because they're from my hometown. And I remember them like handing out cassette tapes when I was in high school. Like they'd get like a kid in high school to bring a box of like 32 cassettes and like give out their demos, whatever. Not that I've been a huge fan of them, or that I really care about like they're from their hometown pride type of thing. It's like whatever. I don't care where they come from, whatever. But like that song Iris, where the lead guitarist like tuned his guitar to something like B, like literally the note B. That's it.
Yeah.
Just in different octaves on it. I don't remember what the tuning was. And then Tim Pierce was the studio musician that did the slide solo on that. And then the Goo Goo Dolls were obviously already pretty established, and then they just brought in this other guy to add like a little quick solo over top of it.
Yeah.
Whether or not like it's like, oh, I want Tim Pierce's sound. They just wanted something to fill out that particular, and that was a huge hit. That was like everywhere,
Right?
But altered tunings didn't take over acoustic guitar playing to the extent that you think that it would because of that song. Though, I mean, I'm in the altered tuning thing. My steel string is almost never in standard, but my point with that is like they wanted a particular song, so they hired like this guy type of thing. You got stories about the Beatles where they couldn't nail parts, where they'd be like, yeah, why don't you take like a break, call up the jazz drummer, have him come in and nail Ringo's part and whatever. I think that ultimately, like in one sense, it's the producer that could cause the homogenization of particular sounds, but I don't think that's on the studio musicians because it's like somebody's like, yeah,
well, I'm not trying not to pick on the studio musicians.
Yeah, I know,
because they're great. This is not a knock on their capability.
This is not a knock on the ability at all.
Yeah.
This is a critique of the potential homogenization and where it comes from in terms of like what spot in the line. Is it the studio musician? Is it the band? Is it the producer? That's over both? This is the record label saying, hey, we need a hit because we need to recoup our certain thing. And the answer to all those is yes. Like every little thing with that factors into getting a particular sound out of it. It's like Tim Pierce has played over hundreds and hundreds of albums all over the place. He's like the in-demand guy. And what's funny is like, I'm like, I remember watching a video and I'm like, I wonder how much money this guy has made. Because it seems like he's in this small like studio area. And there's one small video of him like kind of like walking through his house. And it's just freaking gigantic. It's like, that's like a closet in his house. Everything else is like, he's made his money, which is great. Good on him. I think he's a phenomenal player. Really tasteful. But to sum up my point, I don't think it's the musicians themselves that are homogenizing things. It's a multifactorial issue with the higher ups wanting the money, the producer that happens to be like this guy's turning out the hits, so we all tend to want him as a producer, which leads to that like stamp signature of his production aspect. And then you got the musicians that you're going to hire people that can do the job that you want. Because why would I be like, I'm going to audition like 17 different guitar players for this part? Or I know 3 guys that are pretty much in the genre. Hey, are you available? All right, come on, let's do this. And that's just practicality. It's like, as much as I'd love more creative aspects, I'm going to go with the closest thing that's available just to save the time and potentially the money.
Right, but so well, if I re-say your thing in a much more cynical way, you're saying that it's about the money. Like, it's not about the art.
To an extent, it is period. I mean, even, I make significantly less than most of the big players for many obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But I'm in an area where I don't have to worry about, like, fitting into a particular thing to bring in particular money.
Yeah.
If I was scraping stuff together in LA and they were like, we need you to strum chords in this pattern, though I might not like it, I'd be like, okay.
This is not a knock on whether...
Yeah, exactly.
You got to do what you got to... No, the studio musicians are filling a need that's there, apparently.
Yeah, because...
My take, though, was like... Was it just a mistake to start it to begin with?
No, I don't think so at all. I think, like, you want... Like, we look at it from the aspect of the player musicians, but if you look at it, like... When I did something for this, I won't say like who they were, but I was playing on somebody's album that was a singer-songwriter, and we recorded everything with me on guitar, and it went great in the studio. Yeah. And then when they actually went to do the formal mix down, like the producer was like, "Yeah, the drums are off," because this particular artist was played the drums as well. And they had to redo everything and scrapped everything that I did because I was tied to those particular drums. It was like, crap. All this work and a day, and studio sessions with it, and it just disappeared. And that kind of, it didn't hurt. Like I wasn't like, oh, my emotions. I was like, oh man, I thought I did really good, and I wanted to hear those parts like on the song. And he brought in somebody else because he moved out of the area, and it sounded great. You know, it wasn't like a bad. It came out worse. It was just different. You know,
Right.
So he was looking for something to fit his thing, and he grabbed what was the closest thing to him to get what he wanted. And I think that's fine, and not necessarily creating a particular box, because it's his call as the artist. And I think if I like the other person that I worked with and doing something particularly classical in this other thing was, you know, I was writing to exactly fit what they wanted. Like I had a different idea, but then as soon as they gave me the go ahead with like, yeah, keep it this way, that was exactly what they want. And that's what, oh, there was a clap. So anyways, it happens. It's the Italian. But ultimately it's like when you get hired in as a studio musician, which I haven't done like all the time, but I've done it a decent amount. It's all what the person there wants.
Oh,
you know,
sure.
It clearly. And there's some things that are going to have my voice in it no matter what, because that just happens. And that's also why they pick you to be that musician, is they like that particular sound. So I don't think that it's necessarily killing creativity, but I think the business aspect of it, and in one sense you're right, it is the money, but the business aspect of it comes in. And, you know, this particular sound will sell because it works with this genre, and that's what people are using, and they want the hit. So that's what they do. You know, maybe that's the reason why you see on some singles that are released. Well, I'm dating myself on that one. When singles were released, nowadays it's like they drop like one track. But before the internet, when they would drop a single, there'd be like the official studio version of it, and there'd be like all these remixes. Some of them were like dance club remixes, but other ones were like nothing but acoustic. Other ones had like a totally different structure to the song. So you could kind of see the creative aspect in that. And I've always found that was fascinating on my end. Like I was a huge U2 fan, so I had like literally like floor to ceiling stacks of bootlegs and singles of their stuff, because
Where everything sounded the same. No,
yeah, no, you're not wrong, you know. But the thing that I like to look
the Edge
for,
made a little mistake
like,
on that one. Rochester, 1972. No,
it was there's no little mistakes with Edge. With that much delay, it's going to be a big mistake. But anyway, so that was the thing that I always like to get, was be like, okay, this is cool, and then you got to see all their different renditions of it before they put it out. And some of the bootlegs that I had were like the studio sessions from Acting Baby, which was just really interesting to hear, and the creativity of the song and what the final product was being like absolutely radical different from the first.
Sure, but that's what's cool though, right?
Like that's what's cool.
That's cool when you let a band develop, I guess.
Yes, but U2 also had the FU money to do whatever they wanted.
Of course,
like so that gave them the freedom to be like, we're just going to take this in whatever directions. And you know, there's a money aspect with that. And there's a creativity aspect with it, and they're clearly. I don't think they bring in a whole lot of studio musicians to play their parts. You know, I can't see them being like, "We need another guitar player on this." That's not going to happen for them. Goo Goo Dolls, I could see that happen if they're, and also with that particular track, that was for a soundtrack, not necessarily for something on an album. So that I would approach something if I was writing something.
Yeah, I mean, I see that as slightly different. In that particular Goo Goo Dolls use case, it's more or less the idea of you. Well, maybe another way of saying all this is, did it kill groups? You know, so now you don't have groups as much as you used to, and a lot of that's because you could just hire studio musicians to do all the work for you. It's going to come out polished, sounds good, probably close to whatever you thought you wanted it to sound like or whatever. However, you didn't really like Tim Pierce gets hired for 2 weeks or whatever, and then that's it, you know? And the parts might be good or bad or whatever. But like, what if it was online for Tim Pierce was like, yo, you're betting your entire fortune on this record, right? And you need to invest in this band for the next 5 years as a group, right? And what would you do in that situation? you don't get to just be like, it's not a quality necessarily, but it's like a different skin in the game when
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
when it's your thing as opposed to somebody else's thing. Now, I don't think any of the studio musicians want to do bad or anything. It's nothing like
Yeah,
that.
I
But
don't
they're
think
not
that.
invested in it, right? They're like they want to do good. It's just like anybody who has any pride in their work wants to do good. It's
Yeah,
not it's not that. It's that even if you have a bad day in the studio, but it's good enough and it sort of meets the need of the band or whatever, and people are generally happy. You can walk away from that, get your paycheck, and feel generally okay about it.
yeah, and that's exactly what happened with one of my situations.
Yeah,
Like, they wanted, like, I made a mistake, and but they liked it, so they wanted to keep it. The
yeah,
classical guy in me is like, that's not what I wrote on the page. It's like, no, let's not do that. But it's not my song, so I'm
right.
like, okay, whatever you want, And that's, I think that's the other thing that goes, at least coming from my experience with it. It's like, if somebody's giving me a check, I'm gonna do what they want in my particular voice, and if they don't like that stuff, they can ditch it. I'm not gonna be necessarily offended. I would have liked to have been like pristine with it, but if they liked the little organic
Right.
fluff, which to the persons that aren't playing it, they're not going to know.
Sure.
Like, nobody hearing that would think that that was a mistake. Um, but like me, it's the classical perfectionism to an extent is like, damn it, I don't want that to be out there. But whatever, it works, and it was what it was, and it's a great tune. So I don't think that the aspect of like them sitting down and being like, okay, well, that's good enough, is derogatory to it. Because even just watching those interviews with Tim, he's done tons of work. I watched a thing where he did like 2 weeks with Bob Dylan
Yeah.
recently, and they used like next to nothing of his work.
Sure.
Like, which he was like, that's not the point. I was playing with Bob Dylan.
Yeah. Right.
I was happy. Which I'm not a huge fan, but if he called me up, I'd be like, hell yeah, I'm there. So I don't think that the aspect of the studio musician is necessarily killing the creativity. Like, another reference, an old friend of mine. I'm not going to name drop on this one with him as a particular artist. But he's gotten pretty big, which is great for him. I'm super thrilled. Doing a lot of pop writing in the overarching term, not like specifically pop, but popular singer songwriter stuff. And he it was doing some type of a funk thing, and he had Corey Wong play on it, which is like, well, of course you're going to have him. That'd be
Right.
the guy that you call, And he was totally capable of playing those parts, but the difference is like, there.
Yeah,
I
but don't you think he
like
did that? Like
60%.
that's a money
But
play again. I mean,
of course, and
yeah,
he's taking all the risk by paying Corey Wong to play that part, because it's like he's got to shell out the cash to have him perform
yeah,
on it, and hopefully that song makes back the money that he's invested into it. So in one sense, like, if he was trying to play it, he probably could have, but he's like, that would have taken me like 3 weeks to nail that part, or I can have him do it in an hour.
this reminds me of a story though. Pat Metheny, right? He So he was playing with Gary Burton when he was pretty young. Gary Burton was pretty famous, monster musician. Um, and Pat was getting some love, right? I mean, there's this like 19, 20-year-old guitar phenom, got a pretty unique sound, and like people knew who he was, you know, or were starting to know who he was. So he was getting offers to do a record, and Gary was, who was his mentor too, right? Like this one of the greatest musicians that's been alive, probably. Was kind of like, don't put an album out until you're ready. And like he would like bring these songs that he was writing to Gary, and he'd be like, yeah, I mean, like people have already done what you just like. What are you saying that's unique or new, right? So that's one side of it. But the other side of it, so he finally gets the record date. Like he kept getting off. I guess my point with him being known and playing with a pretty big band was like he had already got record deal offers, but he kept saying no. So he finally had the songs for it, and his plan was to hire a bunch of like jazz legends to play on this record, right? He was going to get like Jack DeJohnette and Ron Carter or something. Like he was trying to figure out who to play with it. And Gary was like, well, why don't you, I mean, your band's good. Like the band you've been playing with is good. You should play with that band.
Mm-hmm.
And he talked him into it. You know, and it ended up being like Jaco Pastorius and like, you know, like, you know, like, but like, if he would have just
did the
used
recording in Europe.
What's that?
Didn't he
Yeah,
record
I think the
in
first one was in Europe. Yeah, because it was ECM, so he went to Manfred's, whatever.
That was in the Beato interview that he was.
Yeah, I think and I think he's talked about it before. But yeah, so like, instead of just grabbing people, because you know he would have got plenty of like name recognition by putting like famous drummer, bass player, whatever on these records,
featuring so and so. That
yeah, and that would have probably put the record on the map a little bit higher because, as he's mentioned in interviews, it almost got unnoticed, you know, when he first put it out. And part of that is because he used his own band, but his band was good. His band was creative and interesting and doing unique stuff. And imagine if he just would have went with the, like, what that would have hurt the world of art, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you would have hurt. And it's not that who wouldn't want to play with Ron Carter and Jack DeJohnette, and he did that later. And you know, like, these are the greatest musicians alive or whatever. But we would have never heard Jaco. And I wish I'm shooting myself for not knowing who the drummer was now. But it's like another, like, you know, change the game kind of drummer, you know. And you know, the studio scene would have been a mistake ultimately. You know, that's one of the greatest. That record is now considered, you know, it's one of the greatest jazz trio records, whatever, ever. And it took a while for it, but the art of it, the thing that made it unique and special, was the development of that band.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, again, it might have been more polished with seasoned veterans, right, and all that, but you would have, like, the art of it wouldn't have been there. The thing that they worked on, the thing that they were all invested in, spent years developing, is represented on that record now, and still represented on that record. Mm-hmm. Not the, like, hey, I got a great musician and they showed up for a couple of days and did a good job.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like it's this is not a knock at all on any of the quality of musicians. I mean, Tim Bierce is amazing. Michael Landau and Larry Carlton and Carl Verheyen and all these guys. I mean, they're incredible musicians. Like, they're some of the best guitar players that will ever live. They're amazing. And a lot of those guys are very unique, like, when they do their own stuff. So this is not like a knock on them at all. But it's kind of like, well, what happens if you would have used the guitar player from your hometown? You know, that maybe they're not Michael Landau. Nobody is. You know? And yeah, it wasn't quite as polished. And yeah, they didn't own a 59 Les Paul and a the perfect plexi head or whatever, and they used like a shitty amp that, you know, they happened to be using for years. But in the end, would the quality of the art be better? Like, it's that was really the question I'm proposing. Okay. Is did we like miss out on, like, Hank from Minneapolis that, you know, like, would have been like a game change, like, would have been the next Jaco, but, you know, we hired Tim Pierce instead to do it.
That is a hell of a question, mainly because it's like, it's unquantifiable.
Oh, of course.
Because you have no idea.
Yeah.
You know, could it have been better? Well, everything could be better.
Well, it's not better. Better is a weird word. But I want to say, I want to say, like, artistic. Let's say more.
But even then, like,
I know art is a weird word, but there's got to be a quote that I'm forgetting about art, but a lot of it's about perspiration, right? And I'm sorry, yes, I know there was a lot of, like, work to get to the capability of the studio musicians and their vast collection of amps and ability, took a lot of hard sweat, but the sweat equity was not put towards that project. It wasn't put towards developing the Minneapolis sound or whatever, like,
Oh, okay. All right.
it was trying to be a better musician, which is all good. But I don't know. It's just one of those things that I feel like art's kind of a weird thing, but
Well,
it doesn't have to always be better. It doesn't have to be polished. It doesn't have to be.
Yes.
Who has
I completely agree.
who has the best, who draws the best lines or whatever. Like, that's not what makes something art.
It's without going down the philosophical rabbit hole of like what is art, but to keep it where we're at, the developing something is the underlying. It seems to be like the underlying thing that you're going with, like what makes it creative to push it outside of the genres that are kind of overarching gatekeeping, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And that I totally agree with you on that point. Like, it can totally get to a gatekeeping type of thing where it has to be this particular thing in this particular mold. But within the nature of art is its own destruction and reconstruction, because every artistic movement starts out as a pushback against another one. Just and then at that next generation pushes back against that latest thing, and then it's kind of interesting if you look at the time changes for the periods of art just from music history. It's like it's taking much shorter time now than it did back then, and that's probably because of the flow of information is so fast,
certainly,
compared to where it was. You can watch it shrink, like Renaissance is like 200 years, Baroque gets to around like 65, 70, and then shrink, as it goes up. So who knows? With that, nowadays it's like I just, surprisingly enough, I was scrolling through TikTok, which is strangely addicting. Not strangely, they probably designed it that way. But regardless, I think the guy's name is Juke, JVKE in capitals. So I don't know what he was trying to do with that. I don't even know. To tell you, like, I don't know. I just heard the track. It was just like him and a piano. It's like, I'm playing my song for my piano teacher. I'm so nervous, whatever. And he played it. And he's got this cool Philip Glass thing going on.
Yeah.
And then he starts rapping on top of it, which I was like, all right, you have my attention. And then he starts singing, and the guy's voice is like phenomenal. I was like, where is this coming from? It was awesome. So I'm like, I got to get that track. And it's like 3.5 minutes. Great track, great writing, very cool synthesis of Philip Glass, like minimalism piano with rapping over top of it. And then this huge operatic voice section, total pop genre. I was like, now that's cool. Like, taking these totally, I would never think of Philip Glass and rap being in the same thing, and it worked great. There's times where synthesis doesn't work, but this completely worked on that regard. And I was just like, okay, I'll give the guy all the credit. He's got one song that's out. Who knows what'll happen with his career, whether he'll go on to do other stuff. But it's cool to see that. And one of the things, and this ties into what we're talking about. One of the things is after the initial euphoria of listening to the track wore off, I was like listening to the production and diving into what's going on. And it's very simply produced. Like, it's almost cliche-ly produced. It's like starts out with just a piano and he's doing his little rap thing over it. And then it builds, the bass comes in with a little bit of rhythmic stuff. Your typical pop progression in terms of the production aspect with it. And that to me was really disappointing. I was like, this could have been so. And as soon as it starts to get harmonically interesting, like at the end he does like some cool key change stuff. Yeah, it's over. And I'm like, come on. And I distinctly remember that from Steve when I played him one of my original songs, which he liked. He could appreciate the fingerstyle things at that particular time. But he's like, my only complaint with this is that you start to get interesting at the end, and then it stops. He's like, you get into one particular key, and you're in it, and then you do this light change at the end, which is like, ooh, this is new, and then it's over. Like, come on. Where's your idea developing throughout that, and at that time I was like, oh, it's just the way that I wrote it, and that's it,
Yeah.
blah, blah. Yeah, the ignorant college freshman mentality, and I spent the next several years in the composition class getting that kind of kicked out of me, to really look at like how are you developing these ideas,
Right.
So, and I think that also happens with this, to an extent, to some degree, with the artists in the studio. Because I guarantee you, it's not like generally like first take and that's it. Sometimes there's magic, clearly, but other times it's like, all right, we'll try it this way. Okay, can you do it this way? Can you try it this way? Hey, I like that idea. Keep that idea, play it back. And that's two quick examples. There was an interview with Marty Friedman where he was talking about being a studio musician in Japan, like doing all the anime soundtracks and so on, which is really cool. Personally, I feel like that's cool. But he was saying, like, when I'm in the studio with the producer, I'll do this. He's like, one of the biggest skills you can have is be able to replay what you just did, because they might really like that one lick, and he's like, you got to call that back and build off of it on the spot. You can't just go like, can I tab that out real quick? It's like, nope. Rewind the tape, hit it again, type of thing, or at least get as close to it as you can.
Yeah, right.
That's daunting in itself. So that's where his creative aspect was it. And there's another one, I believe it was Steve Lukather. It was an interview in an old Guitar World magazine, and I'm surprised I remember this. But he was talking about he got called into a studio to do like a funk recording on something, and he's like, I'm not like huge into that, but clearly I'm capable of being able to lay down a rhythm section to an extent. And they're like, yeah, we had this kid come in and he was playing this, and what'd you say?
Nothing.
Okay, regardless.
Nobody in LA likes me right now.
Well, whatever. But so he's like, so I go in and I listen to the original takes that this kid had, and I look at the producer and I'm like, why am I going to play over that? He's like, that's fantastic. He's like, this kid was probably like only played funk and that was it, and he like nailed the part. So I looked at him like, you don't need me playing on this. That's great. Use that. He's like, I didn't play guitar on it, which to me like spoke. Probably
that's very cool to do
that. Spoke volumes to me as like the artistic integrity of him being like, that works great. Why the hell do you want me to do something over top of that?
Right.
It's like, that's fine.
But people do that all the time, right? Where
yeah.
And again, there was somebody who had developed a thing, with that artist or as part of that artist. I don't know. It's kind of it's just kind of disappointing, I think, as a listener. This isn't a knock again on any of the quality of the people that they do.
You keep prefacing that like you're gonna get punched in the face.
Well, I know, but I don't want it to sound like I'm like, these musicians are incredible, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
like
that fact.
They're great, and the same with Nashville. I mean, I know we haven't talked as much about, but like what's the joke in Nashville? It's like the person pumping your gas is the best guitar player that you've ever met, right? And that's true, right? Like there's probably a major truth to that, because there is just incredible guitar players down there. But yeah, it's like, I don't know, we're just like kill these projects and we think, oh, we should get Steve Lukather to play funk. Like who even thought about that?
No, I get it. That's like trying to have me play funk. It ain't gonna work.
Right, it's like that just doesn't
I can read
sense.
that, but I ain't proven like the other guys born and bred.
We were listening to Earth, Wind, and Fire earlier, which I adore that band. There's a live record, and I always forget the name of it, but I remember what the album cover looks like. And it's just so good. I mean, it's so good. They're just killing. But I think like, oh, we have this band, Earth, Wind, and Fire, and we decided to get Tim Pierce to play funk guitar on it or whatever. It's like, are you serious? Like, why would you do that? Like,
or grab John Petrucci for it.
Yeah, let's get John Petrucci to play a solo on this.
But it's not. There's a square peg in a round hole.
Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you do that? And it's a live record too, and like, I mean, they're tight, but like, it's kind of loose. Like, it's got a vibe about it, and I don't know. It's like you kill all that trying to make it too pristine.
Yes,
it wouldn't be as good. It would.
That's
absolutely not be as
good. Talked about before.
Yeah,
it's like getting overly pristine.
Yeah, I mean, just some places it doesn't fit.
Yes.
Um,
And I don't, I don't think that would fit in funk because there's something about being in the pocket but not
yeah, it
tight.
almost has to feel loose, but it has to be perfect. It's sort of a funk's a weird one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to do it
But
just right, and you know when
yeah.
it's right, and you know when it's not right. Like,
hmm With the like 3 or 4 times I've attempted to play
yeah,
it with that. Um,
yeah.
but
Most of
the
us can't do it. Yeah, that's the
yeah. Well, I mean, it's just at this point, I'm like, I pretty much live in a classical world mostly. That's pretty much it. So I've gotten to a point where I can't keep trying to play every
yeah,
single
certainly.
song. So
Yeah, and
anyway,
I mean, there's that too, right? There's plenty of musicians, studio musicians who play, and it's kind of like what was that? What was that movie with the hired guns or whatever? Did you watch it?
oh yeah, yeah.
It's like there's plenty of good players, but it's almost like sort of generic, right? Like
hmm
you have to be good at so many things, and you're never really great at anything, and you're doing it professionally, and the notes are right, and you've done what you're supposed to do. But I don't know. There's like in some respects, it's not about being an artist. Like you said, it's about supporting the artist that you're playing with. But you're often stuck in a little box, you know. And the sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Like the golden opportunities you want are the ones that musicians talk about, are like the ones that the big artist hires like great musicians and lets them play. You know, like, oh, I have Steve Gadd on drums. I'm not gonna just have him play like straight rock grooves or whatever. Like, why would I do that? Like, I'm gonna
Would
let
you even
him.
take a gig
Yeah,
if
like
that's
I'm gonna showcase these people because they're awesome and they're exciting to watch, and it's a fun show when you let them
But
loose.
I think that's also the genres. Like the
Well,
more
but
you get
you
into
even hear that. Like I said, I'm
a
trying to
pop
pick.
show.
I'm trying to pick on the pop ones though too. There are pop artists that let their bands play.
All right, I'll give you that. That
Yeah, and those are the gigs everybody wants, but those are the gigs that like the best musicians have stuck in the last 40 years, and they're not giving up
yeah.
that gig. Because one, it's good money, and two, they get to play whatever they want, in a
Yeah.
sense, right?
Well,
Um,
look at Andy, just like Andy McKee with Prince, Purple
yeah,
Rain. Like Andy McKee's a fingerstyle guy,
yeah,
and Prince called him up and wanted him to play on tour with him,
yeah,
playing that particular song, his cover of Prince's song.
right.
And he's like, Prince is sitting there telling me, "Yeah, you're gonna come out. We're gonna have you like with this huge purple robe that's gonna be flowing out over the entire stage, and you're just gonna get up there by yourself, purple lights on you, playing the thing." He's like, "Okay." Like, all right, it's Prince. Of course, I'm gonna do whatever you want. And then he also played for Josh Groban, doing like Little Drummer Boy,
Yeah,
and that was the most underuse of a guitar player that I think I've ever heard in my freaking life. Like, it literally just had, it was just, and the tuning was in a drop D, and every now and again you just hear like the drop D just percussively hit,
right.
and I'm like, that's clear the producer just grabbing that and slapping that in there. And I was like, oh god, that could have been so cool. Like, that's right up his alley. Little Drummer Boy, Andy McKee, the percussive acoustic finger style would fit
Yeah,
absolutely perfect. And Josh Groban is total popra, but they weasel them into it. And
yeah.
that's the other question too: is how much did he actually do, and what did they just take from it? Like, it could have been like this awesome virtuosic thing, and they're like, "Yeah, we're going to take those notes, and that's it."
Yeah,
Which you've had happen to yourself when you've played on
sure.
albums. You've done all this work. Which I remember, I got so pissed when you played me the results of that, because I was doing the recording for you, and I was like, "This is great." And then you sent me like what the guy had finished, and I was like, "My God, he just like took an axe to all
Yeah, right.
that cool stuff and got rid of it." So I think that factors into your argument a little bit, is that maybe to an extent, like, there's this huge creative outburst in the studio, and then the producer and the guy afterwards are like, "Yeah, we're going to take this and this and leave all this,
Yeah.
all the gold that you don't see on the ground." But that's
Well, I
also
don't know. Okay, here's another. This is more of a live. Well, it's studio too. We're gonna pick on your buddy Joe Satriani. I mean, like, and I feel like he's mentioned this recently, where he said he really had to get out of his head on this But here he like hires, and I know he's doing it because he knows he can pay his buddies too. Like, right, he wants his friends to do well and have financial success, and he's financially successful, and he can pay them and whatever. But yeah, you get like Mike Keneally and like Brian Beller and Marco Miniman or whatever. Yeah, like Marco Miniman on drums, and you're like, and it's like, and you're like, what? Like,
can you take
that's
the chain
fine.
guy?
But you know what's funny is like no Satriani fan would be like, I can't believe he let Marco Miniman do that crazy fill on that song. It's nothing like the record of that drum machine. You know, like they would all be like, especially his crowd, they would have been like, holy crap, like dang, Marco is amazing.
That I will. Yes, I completely agree.
And it's like, oh, yeah, Mike Keneally, like, yeah, man, let Mike Keneally play some, you know, and like not just play the 30-second little solo you give him or whatever, because let him mess with your arrangements a little bit. Bring his flavor to it.
Because he let Mike Neely do piano solo arrangements of Steve Vai.
Yeah, that was after the fact. So Steve's the only reason it's a little better in Steve's band is it seems that Steve, when he has like a record come out, at least the drummers, he kind of lets them like figure out their parts and like do this stuff. So you get like a drummer interpretation of it at least. I'm sure he gives notes about what he wants it to be, but he kind of like, you can tell that's a different drummer on different records, you know, like in sort of intentional. Like he lets them figure out parts. And
back to the Satriani thing, because I'm interrupting here because there was a video tape. Good God, dating myself on that one for that the album Satch, right? Whichever the one where
like Dennis Chambers and stuff. That one.
Hang on,
Nathan East and wasn't it Dennis Chambers?
Yes.
Did like more like fusiony, bluesy, whatever.
It was definitely more.
Yeah, that's his best album.
Yeah. But like they had a videotape of the making of that album, and I'd probably, I mean, if that was a CD, I probably burned it in. You know, hang on, I'm looking up the album.
It's called Joe Satriani, I think.
Yeah, that's it, Joe Satriani. That one. And like watching the studio takes on it, because it was like, you know, a 2-hour video. I was like, God, all this stuff would have been awesome in the actual song. Like I like some of the studio takes, the outtakes better than the original, the final product.
You know, awesome band for that.
Yeah, he had an incredible musician, Manu Katché on drums. It was just like, holy crap! Like, and then, like you said, you listen to the final thing, and it's like, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as bad on that record as some of the other ones, but yeah.
No, but I get your point with that. It's like the guy is capable of doing unbelievable stuff, and you're like, just do this.
Yeah, and I get like it's safe in a way. Like, yeah, is there a chance that he could let those guys loose and it would ruin a song? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then it might have been better off with like a simple drum track. But I also think that you know, if he would have let them a little bit like let a little bit off the, you know, the holding the chain back, let them a little bit loose, let them be a little bit more creative. Like some of those songs that were good or even great, like would have been really great. You know, like you would have been like how could you duplicate that song? But like in the end, a lot of his stuff, unfortunately or fortunately, you know, it really is like, it sounds like a drum machine because that's what he used, and then he had it replaced with a real drummer, but as a drum machine part. I don't know how much of that was him or a producer or whatever. I'm going to ignore that. But I'm assuming that mostly him, because it sounds like, you know, even live, like you would see him play with like these incredible people. And they just played what was on the record.
But that was the thing that I thought was interesting, is because you had the album recorded version of Luminous Flesh Giants. And then the one that they did in the video had extra parts that weren't there.
Yeah.
Like on which I thought were awesome. I was like, that's a cool hook. I'm really shocked that this didn't have it. But live, when I saw him live, he played it.
Right.
So it's kind of like, huh. Like clearly he goes through arranging the thing before you walk out on stage, which everybody does. Duh.
Yeah.
I thought it was fascinating that he's like, yeah, I'm going to grab this part that I had before and bring it here. you put it in. It was a cool hook. I can't remember how it went.
Yeah, I think I saw a thing more recently where he was like, before the shows, I don't know if he would participate, but like Keneally, Beller, and Markov would just be like jamming.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like it was really good. And he's like, it took him a long time to and then he'd play with them for like 5 years or something now or something, right?
Yep.
It's like they're basically like a real band,
Mm-hmm.
but none of them get to play in a sense,
Yeah.
not that the parts are not hard or they shouldn't execute them well. I'm sure they do all those things fine, but it's kind of like you could create a thing, you could create a band in a sense and an experience and really take advantage of those musicians.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, and I feel like that's what happens in the studio. That's ultimately that's what you end up with, this like we hired Vinny Colaiuta to play drums and he's just gonna play straight whatever. And you're like, but it's not that you have to have him do like crazy stuff, but why wouldn't you take his opinion on, why wouldn't you? I know why you don't, because it's a financial decision. But if you're spending $1 million making a record, why not have him around for 6 months, help you write the song, help you like rearrange the songs,
and then you got guys like
put his
Devin
flavor
Townsend,
on it. Yeah.
who brings in 3 different drummers and has them play over all the tracks and then puts it all together.
Right.
It's like that level of creative smorgasbord is just insane. Like, I love it, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but it's like you brought in 3 drummers to play the same songs in 3 distinct ways. And then you have to hire somebody to play all 3 parts live. Like, how the hell do you
Devin
find
Townsend,
somebody?
okay.
Yeah, Devin Townsend. It's like, what? But again...
But that was that's almost different. And that's a big pet project that he had and whatever.
But that's my point, though. It's like he wanted that particular creative outflow with that, and that's what he was aiming for. Like in the Satriani thing, just because I have the background with that, it was like he was putting his name on it and what he wanted it. So ultimately, every creativity thing was going to be filtered through him because he's the one making the call. It wasn't a band thing. He's like, I'm Joe Satriani. You have your checks. That's it. Like, I don't think it was that callous, but that tends to be like ultimately that's what it is. That isn't for everybody. Like, I could call up musicians to play with my stuff, and then I'm going to sit down at the end and be like, though these parts might think that they're awesome, I don't think that it fits my particular voice, so that loses it. So let me finish this thought real quick.
Yeah.
So here's the question, is that I don't think that the creativity necessarily is lost in the sense of them being constrained in the studio. I think the cutting room floor is where most of that ends up. Just like a director's cut of a film versus the theatrical release versus the extended, whatever. They have, there's other factors that constrain as it goes through the thing to be a commercial product. And granted, that brings in the money aspect of it. But the other part is that, if it's successful enough, you get your extended editions or director's cut or Snyderverse or whatever, where they come in and give you the vision that particular artist wanted to do. And that goes down, it's almost the same way to an extent, because you have the actors doing particular parts and roles and adding their inflections to it. And the director's like, no, I want it this way. It's like, that's totally squishing that particular creative outflow with it in one sense. But the question is does that kill the creative outflow, or does it encourage it because it's steering it in a particular direction? Because you have to have some boundaries.
Yeah, sure. Boundaries are important.
Obviously.
Yeah.
But no,
I heard a quote recently.
Interrupt what point you were going to say.
No. And then it kind of falls in line. I'm going to kind of go around. I'm trying to remember, because you just made me think there was a quote. I think it's Stravinsky. Something about like limitations are what free you. Basically, It's limitations that free you. It's not freedom that frees you. Freedom actually binds you or whatever. Like, but actually putting that
unlimited directions. It's like if you're standing in a field, it's like, we'll go somewhere. God, I can go anywhere. Like, that's honestly intimidating.
Yeah.
Versus where if you have an idea.
Well, it also probably makes you do something that's not so unique. But yeah. So here's a case in point of someone that it's pretty interesting. So Chris Cornell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Part of Soundgarden, part of why am I blanking now?
Audio Slave.
Audioslave. And then he also put out a bunch of his own solo albums,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, I think you could probably easily argue on his solo albums had higher caliber musicians than those other two bands. You know, he hired like studio musicians to do this, you know,
Mm-hmm.
schooled good musicians, that know grungy, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
stuff. But it's not as good.
Yeah.
It's just
I'll say
not
that.
as good as Soundgarden or Audioslave, which were bands that developed as a thing. And that these Audioslave, maybe you could argue, is like, well, it's already established people and blah blah blah. But like it really, they went into it as a band and they really tried to
Yeah,
make it something, right?
absolutely. That was a
Um,
great
and
project.
they all treated it as like this is, I'm putting myself out there as this is my next main focus for the next 10 years or whatever. Um, in Soundgarden, obviously that was their main focus, and that's what they put all their blood and sweat into. And yeah, I guess to the point of okay, if you put out an album, right? You said I want to put the Adam Keeler album, and I'm gonna have drums and bass. And I'm gonna try to get all the people that I really like to play on it. I happen to just get this endowment of like $300,000, and I can do whatever I want, and it has to be for the record. I can't use it for anything else. Um, so I'm gonna get all the people I really like on it. But you know, what do you really know about drums and bass and all these kind of things, right? You might have some vision of what you like.
Mm-hmm.
You might have some players that you like. Um, but it'll probably come out pretty great, right? But
Would hope.
but like it wouldn't be a band,
Yeah.
you know?
No, you're right.
It wouldn't be like the people that you hired might be like, "Oh, this sounds like a cool project. Let's do this," and I really like what you're trying to do, and I won't hope that I can make it good, and I really appreciate that you called me and all that stuff. Um, but it's not their project,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes you wonder a little bit, like, what if you had the 300 grand or whatever? Would have been better to spend like a year and a half, like developing a band locally, you know, and pick musicians who seem into it and like play some shows and do all this stuff and be like, yo, I want to make this a real project. We're all equal contributors to this thing, and like you get this view from multiple angles, and people can add their 2 cents. I guess I'm in a long-winded way of saying like even Chris Cornell, as good as he was, and those solo records are pretty good, but they're just not as good, like in my opinion at least, and I think most people's opinion. Um, but it took like having like a real, equal contributor band that everybody's getting paid the same, and like they're all equally invested in putting as much into it as they can. You get all those perspectives that make the whole greater than the sum of the parts or whatever.
But even within the band, there's definitely like
A leadership, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Ignoring the whole like architecture
yeah.
of
Okay,
yeah,
I'll drop that. It's
yeah,
gone.
yeah. I know. Yeah, and I don't really know if Audio Slave was equal parts everyone, or if Chris was mostly in charge, or Tom, or I don't know. I have no idea.
Who knows? It's like
But
that's also the advantage of having a producer sitting in the room too, because it's like the detached guy that's not who's involved, but not like as
right.
attached as everybody else. He's like, he can make a far enough away call.
Well, maybe that can be good and bad though, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, we know it can be bad because it'd be a bad producer, but even a good producer might not let the band develop something that could be really good. Cause like, yeah, I don't know, like that one part there, it got a little like too free jazzy or whatever. Like, probably shouldn't do that. Like, that's snooze fest. But it's like, well, maybe they could have developed that thing and it would have turned into
Yeah, that's
something
what
great.
David Maxim Mimic or whatever released a video talking because he just delayed Bilo 4, which I was really looking forward to. But he's like, I was finishing up the solo and all of a sudden took it in this new direction, and he's like, I'm not done. And so he like called up the guy that was singing. He's like, yeah, we're doing the key change. Can you come back tomorrow?
Right.
You know, it's been months since he originally recorded the first part. He's like, changing it. Let's go. And so he's like, it's just the creative process. He's like, the advantage is he's so well versed with all the production levels of things that it's like he can do whatever the heck. He doesn't have a producer. He's his producer, and he brings in the other musicians. And it's he plays all the main instruments. And the only thing I don't think he plays is drums, but I'm not even sure about that. He probably does. But it was an interesting interview. It's on YouTube. Just him talking about like, yeah, you know, it's like it's done when it's done, and I know everybody's been waiting, and I had like this goal of releasing it on this day because like he dedicated it to his mom who had recently passed away, and it was her birthday, and he's like, I really wanted to have something, so he's like, I'll release a single, but the album's taken a new life, you know, it's like this new thing happened, and that I get, like there's rabbit holes that you get to where it's like, oh, where did that come from?
Right.
And you like, that's it. You just go. And he didn't. He doesn't have the pressure of like a pop release or whatever. You know, it's like he can do what he wants. So, and that's, I would say, like as much as there's those aspects with the creative things with the studio musicians, today we have this advantage of having like a studio in your house that gets near. Well, it's definitely, I would argue, definitely better than the quality of the things in the 60s. You know, it's just technology. That's what happens. It compresses, it gets better, and it gets cheaper. So, like, with that aspect of it, of like the restraint in the studio, the home studio guys can do whatever the hell they want and take as much time as they want.
Sure.
Really be that much creative, even if they bring in particular studio musicians. You know, and clearly David does because he has a singer on it and he doesn't sing. So I guess all I'm saying is that, like, you know, we have those perspectives of creativity being squished to fit into a thing, to fit into a particular pop genre to make the money. But the counterpoint to that is there's so much accessible stuff now that anybody can do whatever the hell they want and release it and see what happens to it. I mean, for crying out loud, if I can find a song on TikTok, of all places, which I still hate TikTok, but I still produce videos there all the time because money. Not that I'm seeing anything yet, but just saying. But just like, you know, if this guy can do it, and I run across it randomly, just literally scrolling, you know, while I'm, well, you know, using the restroom or whatever, like everybody does. So, and it's like, that's a cool song, and then I go and I grab the track, and you know, it's really cool for that accessibility. Like that was the one thing that, like, intellectually I was looking at it and I'm like, my God, you know, like to go like, oh, there's this, click, click, boom, got it. Like, didn't leave the toilet seat, and I have new music in my hand.
Oh yeah,
it's awesome. A whole other discussion of value, you know, potentially with it. But I got the track, you know, he's got his money, and that's that.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be distribution was the biggest hurdle for musicians, and now distribution's effectively free.
Yep.
But now everyone's just, you know, now you have a different problem.
Now it's gotten to a huge
You're not competing
crowd.
against like 3 bands in the area. You're competing about 5,000 bands in that block around the corner, you know.
Yep. But it's cool. You know, I think that aspect of it is great because it's a lot more to listen to and to hear. So anyways, yeah, I'm starting to run out of intellectual vigor. Getting tired. But I think that overall, like, you know, the discussion, this idea of like, does a studio musician kill the creativity to an extent? I think the answer is the old yes and no. You know, like there's an extent to where that particular artist's voice is muffled for the sacrifice of having the other artist's voice come through more. And that's just the knock in the face that you got to take with doing that, because it's not your gig. You're there to support the other guy. That being said, he wanted you in there to do a particular thing with your voice. So you have that with that. And obviously, if there's a hit song, somebody else is going to, if it works one way, you're going to want to work it another way because money. I don't like that fact. but that's just the reality of it.
One thing you've said a couple times now, and I'm not sure that it's true.
Okay.
Because you keep saying, like, we hired somebody for their voice. And I don't know that that's necessarily the truth in a sense. Because there's a lot of chameleon sort of players. Like, and Tim Pierce is probably one of them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't, like, specialize. I mean, maybe he specializes in a few things, but, like, he's more of the guy like, yeah, I don't really know. We might need acoustic guitar. We might need a little bit of this blues thing. And then we're going to need like this slide play part. And then do you play any slack key guitar stuff? And could you do this thing? You're like, it's kind of like, oh, yeah, I can do all those things. I've done those before. I know how to do those. Maybe some country parts. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'll get you, you know, where the difference is like, well, I have a country song. So maybe I'll hire, Johnny Highland to play on it, you know, like you know, because that's his like I would be hiring Johnny Highland to do something very specific because he's really good at it.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's amazing, like chicken picker, whatever, you know, like you'd hire him to do that thing, you know, it's very specific, and you can tell it's Johnny the second you get him.
Mm-hmm.
Now Johnny might do the chameleon thing too, but that's a whole other thing. But like, yeah, I wouldn't be like, oh, I'm gonna hire Johnny Highland and then I want him to just play like, you know, some strummy chords and, you know, stuff he'd be plenty capable of doing.
Yeah.
You know, and play some drop D riffage on there or whatever. Like that to me, that's not hiring him for his voice. That's hiring him because he's a competent guitar player that can do a lot of different things.
But if that leads to the other question that just came up, is do you hire somebody to do the things that you can't do? Like generally,
well, of course, yeah.
Yeah, generally, of course, that's exactly why you're hiring them. Because if you could do it yourself, you do it yourself. You know, so.
But yeah, we keep talking. We keep going back to like, I'm doing a project and I need 10 musicians to play on it, so I hired all the 10 musicians that I like to play on it. Not, I started a band. We're playing a bunch of my original songs. I got a record deal. Instead of using my band, I decided to hire a bunch of known players to play on it because I'm hoping that, you know, one, I think they'll be professional and I've always wanted to play with that guy. And two, their name, you know, will help promote the record. You know, or something. But it's like, well, but the guys I was playing with are fine. You know, they're good musicians, and they've been around playing with me for 3 years. But I've decided to use other people instead, and that's kind of that's where I think it's disappointing. I guess you don't get to hear Jocko now because you didn't get the opportunity.
Yeah.
Now, Jocko is one in a million.
Yeah, of course.
He would have eventually broke somewhere, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. You could have missed him though. Maybe we would have missed him. We probably have missed plenty of people like that.
Yeah,
and I think that's ultimately bad. Ultimately, not a good thing.
Yeah. But that's a discussion for another time because I might be.
Yeah,
tired.
no, we're gonna have to tap out.
Yeah,
it's all right. We're getting back into this. What's that?
I said it's great to be back.
Yeah,
great to be back
and we matched shirts today too. So it was good.
I noticed that. I wasn't gonna say anything, but yeah, that's you know, great minds think alike and fools seldom differ.
Yeah.
So at least we got that going for us.
Got the pale white V-neck going on. We're good.
Yeah, I was gonna say if there's a company that wants to send us V-neck T-shirts, we'll wear them.
I did have some Knob Creek the other day.
Oh, that's fine. I was gonna bust out some Talisker, but I decided to stick away from the alcohol. I was already tired. So next time, Knob Creek or Talisker.
Well,
one after the other.
Wood Air Meddlers. It's good to see y'all.
And
we'll see you soon.
Yeah.
Peace.